Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Remento webinar. It's so nice to see everyone here with us. My name is Charlie Greene, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Remento. And on behalf of our entire team, I want to express my deepest gratitude for all of you making the time to be with us. I also want to let all of you know that we are recording our webinar today, and we're going to be sending out an email with the link to the recording for all of you who maybe want to watch our session again. We've got a really exciting agenda for today, 4 parts to be specific. We're going to begin with a fireside chat with Bruce Feiler, the New York Times bestselling author of the new book called A Time to Gather, whose work has long explored family storytelling and rituals and connection and the shared experiences that bring people closer together across generations. Then I'll share a little bit about the story behind Remento and why we set out to create this company and our product in the first place. And then after that, we'll do a deep dive into how Remento actually works, from selecting prompts to recording stories to preparing your book for printing. And then finally, we've reserved time at the end for a live Q&A where each of you are going to be able to submit your question to be answered. And so with that administrative business out of the way, I am extremely excited to welcome our fireside guest, Bruce Feiler, to our webinar today. When we started building Remento in the first place 5 years ago, I went out and had a couple hundred conversations with people to get advice. And I felt like every person I spoke with had some connection and push for me to get to know Bruce Feiler, who is unequivocally the authority on all things related to family storytelling and narrative. And that is a large part because of his 2013 New York Times piece, The Stories That Bind Us, that taught so many of us that there's a hard science that actually connects knowledge of family history with emotional well-being, including for our children. Bruce is the author of 7, soon to be 8, I suspect, New York Times bestselling books, 3 TED Talks that have been viewed by more than 5 million people in total. And his brand new book called A Time to Gather, you see it on the screen, is out and is truly what I think to be one of his best. You can either buy the book on Amazon right now or in a couple minutes after you've had a chance to learn about it. If you care about family stories, you've already been shaped by Bruce's work, whether you know it or not. And so I could not be more excited to welcome Bruce Feiler to our webinar. Bruce, it's great to have you with us.
Having me for that kind introduction. And I will say, by way of introduction, I quite remember the email where I got from a mutual friend and a mentor of yours who said, I don't send emails like this lightly, but I think you and Charlie would get along and you might benefit from knowing each other. And it's been a privilege and an honor to watch the passion that you've devoted to building Remento, as you've been another big idea of mine, as you've been agile in adapting the model, always focused on what will serve storytellers and families, and now have finally arrived at a platform, at a community, at a way of doing this that's going to help and already is helping millions of families around the world. So I'm pleased to have been involved on this journey and to watch you long since supplant any advice I can give you, and even more to talk today to the community about the power of storytelling, about the power of family, and about the power of ritual gatherings and how we can serve all of us and all the members of all of our families.
It's incredibly kind of you to say, Bruce, you sit on my Mount Rushmore of people I look up to and mentors. So to hear you say all that is, I greatly appreciate that. Thank you. I definitely want to get to the new book because there's so much more to unpack there than we actually ever could in the amount of time that we have. But I want to start where at least and I think a lot of us found you in the first place, which was spending a lot of time investigating, exploring, helping us better understand family stories, why they matter, and how meaningful when they are honored and celebrated within a family, how much value that can deliver to the family. And so I'd love to start off by just asking, what pulled you to this exploration of family stories in the first place?
So to go back in the story a little bit, I've been a professional writer now going on 40 years, and I tend to take on projects that grow out of my personal life experience. Early in my life, I wrote books about year I spent teaching junior high school in Japan, or year I spent as a graduate student at Oxford and Cambridge. I spent a year as a circus clown. In my 30s, I went back and forth writing books and making television shows about contemporary religion and spirituality based on adventure travel I made around the world, visiting holy and spiritual places to all different kinds of faiths. Then, as you know, I got cancer as a young adult when I became the parent of 3-year-old identical twin daughters now 21 years ago. And I had an osteosarcoma in my left femur. And so suddenly I was the walking guy, having written this book and made this television series called Walking the Bible, and I couldn't walk anymore. And I had all this sort of curiosity and adventure travel, and I had kind of no choice but to apply it to my own family, not always to the happiness or joy or appreciation of my family, but I got very interested in how contemporary families work. And I sort of quickly stumbled into a kind of a paradox, if you will, which is that everything about modern families has changed. The definition of a family, the role of moms in the family, the role of dads in the family, blended families, adopted families, divorced families who live in one house, and married people who live in separate houses. And everybody I know on the parenting journey, and this was almost exactly the point you are on as a new father yourself, we did one of two things. Either we called our parents and their experience was so outdated as to be irrelevant, or we called our friends and they were just as clueless as we are. And so I said, well, there must be wisdom out there. And so I set out on this journey that ultimately consumed a large chunk of my life, led to my book, The Secrets of Happy Families, led to 10 years of writing a column about contemporary families in the New York Times. And one puzzle I kept coming back to in particular was the challenge of family dinner, because as anybody who's in a family has heard, there's all this evidence that, having family dinner together makes a family function better. The problem with that is that it doesn't work for many families. Americans rank 31st on a list of 30 people of countries that have the most family dinner together. My wife runs an organization around the world. We had to have our kids bathed and fed by the time she often came home from work. What if you work nights? What if you're in a restaurant business? So I got digging into the whole puzzle of family dinner. And what I learned about family dinner is that there's only 10 minutes of productive time in any conversation, that the rest is taken up with, pass the ketchup and take your elbows off the table, which, as the sort of manners are in our family, matters to me. But it turns out that you can spend that 10 minutes at any point in the day and have the same impact. And in the course of trying to find alternative ways to think about family bonding, someone gave me a tip, and they said, you should call Marshall Duke. So I called Marshall Duke, and as Marshall likes to joke now, I basically invited myself to dinner. And Marshall has recently retired after 50 years as a professional psychologist at Emory. And Marshall studies rituals, storytelling, and how families make connection. And he and his colleague Robin Fivish told me about this research that nobody had read, that had been published in a journal that no one had much paid attention to, about the value of family storytelling. And the essence of the idea is that children who know more about their family history have a better ability to navigate the ups and downs in their lives. And they did this with a whole series of studies, and they created something that I later in the New York Times called the Do You Know test. Do you know where your grandparents were born? Do you know an aunt or an uncle who had cancer or a setback in their life? Do you know what happened when your parents met or around the time that you were born? And they tested this, and the children who scored highest on the test, which meant that they knew the most about their family history, it was the number one predictor of a child's emotional well-being. And they did this research in the summer of 2001. And anybody listening to us probably will remember that at the end of that summer was 9/11. And then they went back and they retested the children that they studied. And the children who knew more about their family history were better able to navigate the collective trauma of 9/11 that the experience was having on people wherever they were. And I knew right away that this was the most interesting story that I had encountered in this work on families that I was doing. I put it in my book, The Secrets of Happy Families. At the time, I was writing a column in the New York Times, and my editor said, okay, we want to run an excerpt. And I said, well, I'm going to save the best part for you. And that became The Stories That Bind Us. not a week has gone by in the intervening 13 years when I haven't heard people, but that is the story of how I met Marshall and Robin, and how their story affects exactly what you're doing at Remento and all of us are doing in trying to figure out how to tell our own family stories to our own offspring.
Well, I probably reread that piece, like every other week for the last 5 years. And I think one of the reasons why it resonates with me so much is when we talk to our storytellers, one of the things that we often hear from them so often is, why me? Why would it make sense for me to take my stories of my little old life and share them with my family? And what the data tells us from the research that you unearthed and made visible to all of us is that if you love your family, sharing your stories is actually not an expression of vanity, but it's a gift to your family in so many different ways.
Well, I think that there's an interesting question there and an interesting kind of wrinkle to dive in for what you're talking about and what you're doing at Remento. Because I think if you would ask me that question straight out, I would have answered it somewhat differently. I would say that the secondary thing that family storytelling does is provide a legacy for the children and the grandchildren to read, to have, to draw back on. I did this with my own father late in his life. I'm now in the process of doing it with my mother in a slightly different way that I'm doing it with my father, that I did it with my father before he died. But that is far and away the second most important reason to tell your family story. By far and away, the most important reason to tell your family story is it will help you. Okay. Mm-hmm. It turns out, and this is a field that I was young at the time I entered it, and yet has become even greater. There is a whole field about, narrative gerontology, right? So gerontology is the story of studying how we age, and narrative gerontology looks at specifically how the importance of stories when we age. As you age, the process of going back and revisiting your life story, including its ups and downs and twists and turns, actually helps you process your own life and develop more meaning, understanding, compassion, and well-being around the life that you have lived. So I would actually say that the number one reason to do it is for yourself. And then the secondary or tertiary reason is to do it for your offspring. And the reason I said that that's a wrinkle, and in effect, you are directly or indirectly asking me to give advice to people who are telling stories who might be listening to us. I would say in some ways, to me, it's more important to make yourself the audience than to make your offspring your audience. Like when you talk to the people who understand this, and this field in some ways was invented by a guy named Biren, who I saw very, very late in his life. One of the things that they have found is that people who tell the stories just for their children or grandchildren actually get less satisfaction and growth out of it, because what you will tend to do is kind of, how do I say this? Sugarcoat it or kind of downplay it. So you might have a grandchild that's 5 now, but that grandchild or child is not going to always be 5. And so I would actually write it for yourself and for your peers, and let your kids, grandkids, or nieces or nephews or whoever it might be work their way toward it. Tell it truthfully. It will help you and eventually be more helpful to them.
It's such powerful advice. And I think, Bruce, what you're saying is probably resonating with some of our community members who listened to our last webinar, where we had a reminiscence therapist, Risa Warner, speaking about the power of storytelling, not purely as a benefit for a secondary or third party, but actually for yourself. I want to share with our community a conversation that you and I had in the lead up to Remento being featured on Shark Tank. And we spent a lot of time talking about the way that we would incorporate my story into that pitch. And I happen to be more reserved kind of dispositionally, but your feedback was effectively to do what I should do, what you had done, which is through all of your speaking, through all of your writing, not shy away from the things that can be difficult for a family to talk about. Don't, as you to use the phrase you just used, don't sugarcoat the past, because there's as much to learn and as much to engage with. And in my case, it was about losing a parent. And in your case, you've spoken about all sorts of different things, getting cancer, losing your dad. I wonder for those who are sitting in the audience who are thinking about writing their own life story, and they're wondering, what are the stories that they should focus on? And perhaps what are the stories they should not focus on? What kind of advice would you have about how they could think about the right things to be focused on?
I can't think of a single story that I would say, as a rule, you should not focus on. The book where I wrote most about this, Life is in the Transitions, quite literally begins with the following sentence. I used to believe that phone calls don't change your life until one day I got a phone call that did. It was from my mother. Your father is trying to kill himself. Okay. An essential part of my life story is that my grandfather, my father's father, got Parkinson's, got depressed, shot himself a month before I graduated from high school in 1983 in Savannah, Georgia. Okay. And this was part of our life story. It was a source of shame. We did not want to tell it. And then my father, later in his life, gets Parkinson's, gets very depressed, tries to take his own life 6 times in 12 weeks. And the only thing that brought my father back to life, and we tried everything, talk therapy, medication, everything, institutionalization, all this kind of stuff, was when I started sending him an email every Monday morning. Tell me about the toys you played with as a child. Tell me about the house you grew up in. How'd you become an Eagle Scout? And my father actually struggled when I said, tell me about, the racism that you saw firsthand growing up in the South. Tell me about the discrimination against women. Tell me about the discrimination against Jews. And he was reluctant to do that. And I actually think that I can make the case that that reluctance is one of the reasons that he became so depressed and stuck. Is he was from a generation of men who didn't, in a certain part of the country, in a time of life, who didn't talk openly about their struggles. So to me, write the story. Now, you may not want to share it with everybody or share it with a grandchild, depending on how old they might be. But the story is about conflict, okay, and how we resolve that conflict. And whenever it's been in my life that there was a story that I said I don't want to tell, that turns out to be the most powerful story. You want to tell it in an age-appropriate way. You don't need every single detail. Like a little bit goes a long way for sure. But I think. And the reason, and I have talked about the stories that bind us and the secrets of happy families and the power. I've probably done it in 500 locations around the world in the last 15 years. And wherever I do it, people say, "Oh yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, I tell my family story. Oh yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, I'm gonna give myself an A." And I'm like, really? No, because in my experience, those of us, who are parents today, we want to protect our children. Okay, we don't want to tell them the difficulties that we're struggling with. That's sort of the model that we have. We think it will be too much. So I actually think it's the opposite, that we have been trained. It's sort of like the Purell thing. You have young children. You have a young daughter, right? I'm sure there was everyone's got a Purell. You gotta clean yourself. But now we know. It turns out that we're overprotecting our children from some germs, and that can create a problem. It's the same way with family stories. And the reason that the research shows the reason that they are powerful is because the children therefore know people that they know missed the soccer goal, lost the job, had the house burned down, got the disease, what Marshall said is that when people understand that their own family has an oscillating life, people realize when their life starts taking oscillations, they are not abnormal. That is the normal.
And so if we can appreciate that the number one priority is for yourself as a storyteller, but that there are all of these secondary benefits for a family, shying away from the stories that contain actually the most amount of learning potential would be a disservice to the family in many ways.
Well, again, a disservice to yourself because it's not allowing you to process it, and this, not telling them the truth. Because if you only tell them the story that makes you look good and that makes life seem easy, then you are not only not preparing them for when life gets bad, but you are building the expectation that every story is a beautiful, happy story. And in fact, that's unrealistic. So you are climatizing the reader, the listener, to expect that the goal is always going to go in, and that the love is always going to last, and that the disease is always going to cure. But whereas in fact, losing a parent when you lost a parent, or losing a job when you lost a job, or having a tornado take off the roof of your home, whatever it might be, that is part of the story. And to me, when we tell our kids that those things don't happen, when it happens to them, it becomes much more emotionally crippling than it need be.
Yeah. So you've been making this case for more than a decade. It's the stories, it's the family dinners, the agile family meeting, and then you went and wrote this new book, which, from my take, really widens the lens in a really important way, because A Time to Gather is not just about the stories we tell, but it's also about the ways that we are able to come together through life. So let's go there. I do want to say, for people who are hearing Bruce talk, it's very clear this guy knows what he's talking about. But the amount of research that he did for this book specifically is staggering. 16 countries on 6 continents, 50,000 miles traveled, 3 years, a mass baptism in the Vatican, 10 funerals, a week in Ireland, 6 weddings in a day in Las Vegas, a tooth filing in Bali, half the rituals that you attended, Bruce. I don't even know what they mean when you describe them. But the book actually opens up with a line that I have been thinking about since I read it, which was, you wrote that when you and Linda came home after dropping off your daughters at school, you wrote that you felt homesick in your home. And that line really stuck with me. And I'm curious to know why you decided to start the book there.
So I have spent the last all these years talking about families and family storytelling, for sure. I've been a storyteller now for going on 40 years, and the last 7 or 8 years, particularly, I've been talking about how individuals navigate life transition. At which point, I entered a life transition. My wife Linda and I, we have identical twin daughters. As I said, we went from empty nest to full nest in 32 minutes 21 years ago, and 18 years later, we went from full nest to empty nest. And I walked through my front door, and it was so precise, Charlie. I felt homesick in my own home. And I'm like, you can't use that word. Like, that's what kids use. Like, and my dad had just died. My mom, we were losing my mom, right? My marriage needs to be renegotiated. All my friendships needed to be remade. But it was larger than that. I think, to me, it was a sense that I felt this just craving for a connection, and this feeling that so many of us have, that we've abdicated our relationships for our smartphones. As you know, I had this excerpt in the New York Times about A Time to Gather last week, and they called it, the other ones who called the stories that bind us, that it was like, this is the antidote to the lonely life of screens. And every single person I know has this nagging feeling that we are giving up so much of our life in real life to look at a screen, right? And so the enemy's in our pockets, and we all know that. And so what is strong enough to counteract that enemy is really, in a lot of ways, the question I was asking. And the short answer, I just stumbled into yet another incredible story, which is that rituals, we know, work. We have 300,000 years of evidence. The first thing we did before we were anatomical humans was to get together to bury our dead. And so when the group goes through a change, when someone comes in the group, a baby, a wedding, when someone leaves the group, like a coming of age or a funeral, when someone moves, gets sick, or changes job, what does the group do? The group gets together, uses a ritual gathering to remake itself anew, until this century, when we are abandoning them at a shocking pace. Okay, no one's having baby rituals anymore or coming of age. Only half of us are married anymore. Only 1 in 3 of us is buried, which is a shocking piece of data to me. So it took us 10,000 years to build these norms around human gathering, and it took us 25 years to abandon them. And that would be a depressing story if it weren't for the absolutely inspiring story, which is this incredible grassroots movement to create new ways of gathering. Okay. And a lot of those are entirely new. So NICU graduations, right? Gender reveals, cancerversaries, soberversaries, end-of-life doulas, end-of-job doulas, daddy-daughter dances, mom proms. I could go on. And many of these new ways of gathering are things that maybe organized institutions did not honor. So not just marriage, but divorce, right? Linda's favorite chapter is the Taylor Swift divorce party. Not just birth, but stillbirth. Not just fertility, but infertility. And to me, it goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago, right? Which is these oscillations, right? We have these oscillating lives. We no longer have the same trajectory. We all do the same thing, and we all have a midlife crisis between 39 and 44 and a half, which is what the original research showed. No, each of us has our own bespoke fingerprint of twists and whirls and twists, and ups and downs. And each of those moments, we have a choice. Feel isolated, alone, scared, ashamed, or come up with an occasion to use the oscillation as an occasion to connect and reconnect with those around us. And this is the inspiring part of the story. It is happening in real time. The human response to isolation, to division, to polarization, to digital saturation, to AI. There is a renaissance of new ways of gathering. And I both wanted to tell this story and then give everybody in a family or a classroom or a team or an office or a neighborhood the tools to create these kinds of fulfilling gatherings in your own life.
And for those who haven't read the book yet, Bruce defines life rituals as shared and unnecessary acts that make us feel at home. And I loved how simple of a definition that was after going through, tens of thousands of these conversations to be able to distill it down to just distill it down to a couple of words. And then you write in the book, the most enduring life rituals begin with tradition, a cultural keepsake, a valued prayer, a treasured memory, or a beloved dish. And so I wonder if you could speak to what you meant here, and how does tradition connect specifically into ritual in the way that you're talking about it?
Well, let's take the first half of this first here. A ritual is a shared unnecessary act that makes us feel at home. It's an act because we're doing. Okay, one way to think about it in the context of the conversation we're having here, it's sort of embodied storytelling. We're going to get together and tell the story collectively. Okay, it's an act, it's a doing. It's shared because we're doing it together. And there's 500 academic studies that show that rituals connect us to one another, calm us, steady our heartbeats, synchronize our breathing. They connect us to one another. But it is unnecessary, right? You don't need to get down on one knee to propose. You don't need to wear black to mourn. You don't need to circle the bride 7 times to get married or throw vermilion in the sky. These are unnecessary things that make us, that we give collective meaning to, and that's how they become necessary. And finally, it's the answer to the homesickness. It makes us feel safe, secure, understood, appreciated, held, all of these, comforted, all of these ideas. But I think that what is going on here is, and the reason I say that in some ways begins with tradition, is that if you make it up entirely, it's not going to somehow feel like a ritual. If you leave it the same way that it was been done for 1,000 years, it's also not going to be unique. You mentioned I went to 10 funerals in a week in Ireland. And for most of that history, the Catholic Church, the funeral was more like saying a mass, and there was no personalization. And finally, people started to have more personal secular weddings, and the church had to adapt. And so now I went to a church funeral where the guy was a huge soccer fan, so they had a soccer ball and the scarf in the colors of Liverpool, and they played the "Never Walk Alone" song. That's their theme song. So you want a way to keep some elements of the past, but then personalize it and make it bespoke to the people today. And that's what's going on. The top-down, pre-scripted, institutionally mandated rituals, those are what are going away. Bottom-up, bespoke, DIY rituals, that is what's rising. And successful rituals have a balance between, as one ritual designer put it to me, it has to pass the auntie sniff test. Like the aunties have to make it feel like a ritual, and yet it also has to pass the cool uncle exam too, have elements that are very contemporary to who we are today.
The auntie sniff test and the cool uncle exam. That's incredible. I love that so much. There's another line that's stood out to me, Bruce, and you have such a beautiful way with words, and you're such a storyteller. And I can't even imagine taking all of the conversations that you had and finding a way to thread that into a narrative, which you do just so exceptionally well. You introduced the notion of moving from rites of passage to bites of passage, and I'd love for you to share with the audience what that means to you.
Yeah, look, I know we're coming to an end of our conversation here, and we're gonna talk to the users of Remento about how to get the most out of the platform that you've built. And so I'll go back to saying what I said at the beginning of this part of the conversation. The enemy's in our pockets, and we all know it. The forces of division, we have outsourced so much of our lives to our newest algorithms, which are quite literally designed to divide us. That is their purpose. But the only thing strong enough to hold us together in the face of those algorithms is the original human algorithm, which is a ritual gathering. And 100 years ago, when Arnold van Gennep, a Dutch-German anthropologist, coined the phrase rites of passage, he said, we all have four in our lives: birth, coming of age, marriage, death, and they happen in order, and that's the way it is, folks. Well, that's not our lives today. When the enemies are in our pockets at all times, we need to lurch at all opportunities to connect with one another. We have to move, as you say, from rites of passage to bites of passage. And frankly, I learned this when my kids went to college. Like when they're home for spring break, or we just spent a weekend with them when they had their wisdom teeth out. I can't say, sorry, according to a textbook written in Paris in 1909, we are not scheduled to our next rite of passage until you get married, even if you choose to get married, when half of us never even make that choice. We have to do it now. We have to lurch at these opportunities. We have to create what I call a ritual state of mind, which is a commitment to getting up every day and not just doing self-care. I mean, if you go to Instagram, hashtag self-care, 21 million uses. If you go to Instagram, hashtag group care, 17 uses. Like that to me captures it. We wake up every day. What can we do for ourselves? If we wake up every day and say, what can I do today to help connect or reconnect with someone that I love, we can end the we can end the loneliness epidemic. We can make our relationships stronger. And we know the number one predictor of a child's of anyone's emotional well-being is their relationships. So if we have a ritual state of mind, we can reweave our fractured lives, restitch our frayed society, make everybody in our groups happier, and ourselves happier in the process too.
It's so well said, as always, Bruce. I want to ask one final question, but first, just reflect on, in reading this book, there are parts of it that read just so demoralizing in the state of the world, in ways that represent, a fractured society with people looking for purpose. But it also feels like, you do such a great job of transitioning to be able to speak about the story of hope and how the things that actually led to this in the first place are the things that can actually get us out at the same time. And so my last question for you, if people are taking away one thing from this book that they can actually bring into their own lives, what would you hope that would be?
Well, I actually think there's a very clear answer to that question. You don't need permission to be a gatherer. You don't need permission to be a group keeper. You don't need permission to be a healer. I'm giving you permission, but you have permission. As the great West African leader, Malidoma Patrice Somé said, just by being alive, you can be a ritual designer. It doesn't take a lot of money. Yeah, it doesn't take a lot of time. Okay, it takes perhaps some effort, but we know the more effort you put into an experience like this, the more you get out of it. And what do you need? You need three things. You need a beginning, a middle, and an end. You need an opening wow, a way to create a sacred space. Could be your living room, the backyard, the top of a mountain, a beach, a back room, and wherever you're gathered. And you gather people and you say, this is why we're here, right? Identify the tension and then define the intention. We're here to celebrate a graduation, a new baby, a new relationship. We're here to mourn the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, the loss of a pet. Pet funerals are now a $3 billion business. We are here and we are going to comfort, a time to mourn, a time to dance, right? A time to weep, a time to laugh. You're going to say, this is why we're here. Then you're going to have some compromise, because, you and I are getting married. You want a big wedding. I want a small wedding. You and I are grieving. You want to do it under the covers with a pet. I want to do it with a big old wake. Okay, there's going to be differences, but you give everybody something that's their own, and you end with where you just ended, Charlie. You end with a moment of hope. I talked to this designer, millennial, who did a mastectomy circle for a friend. She said, I'm always listening for the deepest fear and the highest hope. And the purpose of the ritual is to turn the fear into hope. Psychologists have this term, your best possible self. You cannot become your best possible self until you identify the goal you have. What is your definition of a best possible self? What we're talking about here is our best possible selves. What is it that would be us at our best? And what the ritual does is it embodies that. Okay, it is embodied storytelling. It is values lived out loud. It is saying, we're in a family and we are going to spend time making sure this family is present for everybody wherever they are in their lives. So exactly those moments that you might have been afraid to tell the story, that's the moment to have the ritual, and that's the story to tell coming out of it.
So incredibly said, Bruce. I don't think we've ever had a guest speak where the number of attendees has grown as they've spoken. And so it's no surprise that you're the person to set that record for us. I think for anyone who's listening to Bruce speak and thinking to themselves, maybe I'm a ritual designer, or maybe I'd never heard that term before, but I appreciate the framework, but could use some inspiration. Bruce's book is full of inspired ways to think about rituals. And so I can't recommend this book highly enough. It is, though, one of those books that once you start reading, you'll read fast, and then you'll keep thinking about afterwards and sharing with your friends. So I recommend it with that warning. It's not something that you'll read and be able to move on from quickly. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a total pleasure.
My pleasure, Charlie. Good luck, everybody, and tell those stories.
All right, Bruce, thank you. Thank you again. We'll now transition to the next part of our webinar. We've got a quick overview of the story behind Remento, and then we'll get into our overview, our deep dive into how the product actually works. For each of us, we all have different reasons for wanting to be building this product. For me, it really comes down to personal passion, which stems directly from personal experience. It was about 9 years after. It was about 9 years ago that we lost. That my mom was first diagnosed with lung cancer, and I remember feeling absolutely terrified after hearing the news that she may never have the chance to meet her grandchildren. And I lost my dad a couple days before my 10th birthday, so I knew firsthand how painful it is to wake up one day and be without someone that you really love. And I also knew how much I would have given to have, in those years after he passed, heard his voice just one more time. So I ended up sitting down and recording a oral history interview with my mom right before she started her chemotherapy. And we were in effect creating a time capsule of her legacy, designed as a way for her to be able to meet her future grandchildren. And frankly, what I thought I'd capture were the stories that when I hear, I roll my eyes because I had heard them so many times. But what she shared blew me away because of how much of what she shared I'd never heard before. And as I reflected on those conversations, I couldn't help but think to myself, why had it taken a cancer diagnosis for me to really get to know my mom in this much more meaningful way? And why, with multiple cameras in my pocket at any given time, had I not actually thought to record her stories? And it was in reflecting on that experience that the vision of Remento was actually born, which is to make it incredibly easy for families to celebrate and preserve and protect the stories of their family by making it delightfully easy to document the memories that have made each of us who we are today. Now, many of you know us by our flagship product, the Remento book, which we refer to as a no-write memoir. And that's because the final product is a hardcover, color-printed keepsake book of stories created without having to write a single word. And so with that being said, I'm going to transition over to the deeper dive into how Remento actually works. Now, for those of you who have been using Remento, this is going to be a review. And for those of you who are considering using Remento in your own family, I hope it makes things a little bit easier to understand how straightforward preserving legacy can be using our product. And so to get started, we'll begin on the Remento website. You can just go to www.remento.co, or you can also just Google the word Remento. And from this screen, I'll click on the button in the upper right-hand corner that says Login, and it's going to invite me to sign into my fully private Remento account. Now, for many things on the internet, of course, you need a password, but at Remento, we don't actually use passwords, but instead rely on the security of your email to protect your account. So once you type in your email address, you'll receive an email with a sign-in link, and then you can click on that link in your email to be logged directly into your private Remento website. And that's where I've landed right here. Now, it's worth noting that the experience I'm walking through right now is on a computer, but you can do all of this from any device, whether that's a laptop or an iPad or a smartphone. Right now, I'm looking at the prompts page, and that's because I'm the host for my mom, Claudette, who I purchased Remento for. And it means that I have the opportunity to customize her experience by selecting the prompts she'll respond to over the course of the year that she does have access to Remento. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add Prompts. And you'll see that there are a few options of prompts that I can add. The first is using questions as a prompt. The second is using photos to inspire memories. And the third is to invite family to vote on prompts. I'm going to click Add Questions, and I'll see that I am looking at a list of questions that have been personalized for my mom specifically. By the way, Bruce Feiler was involved in helping us document, actually write many of these questions in the first place. All of these have been generated using the answers I provided about my mom when I first set up her Remento account. I can also select from trending prompts on Remento. These are the most popular questions asked of our storytellers. And then finally, I can review the Remento question bank. And this specifically is where Bruce's questions come into clarity for our users. It's a curated list of hundreds of questions developed by experts, all sorted into categories. I also want to point out that I can write my own questions as well. You can do this by pressing the pencil button at the top right. Now, let's go ahead and add a photo-based prompt. I can add prompts and select upload a photo, and then I'm going to be able to see that there are actually a few different ways to add a photo. I can add a photo from Facebook or Instagram. Photos can be added via direct connection from either Google Drive or Dropbox, or I can manually add a photo to upload. So I'm going to go ahead and manually upload a photo that I have on my desktop. It's a photo of my parents from their wedding day. And now that it's uploaded, I'll edit the question to read what was happening in this photo and what makes it so special. And then I can go ahead and add it to directly to my mom's queue. Now, this view shows my mom's upcoming prompts, and Remento makes it really easy to rearrange the order if I want. I can simply drag and drop to change the order. Now, these are all prompts I added for my mom, but if I had bought Remento to document my own stories, the process would be the exact same. And by the way, my mom is set to receive one of these prompts per week, but either of us can change the setting to be more frequent if she'd like, or on a different day if she'd prefer. Also, you can click add prompts again, and there's an option to create a poll so family and friends can vote on exactly what topics they most want to hear. And speaking of family, my sister has a ton of my mom's photos from childhood. And so I'm going to invite her to add some of those to my mom's queue as well. And to do that, all I have to do is navigate to the Invite Family button at the top of the screen, and then I can invite her by email or just copy the link and drop it into the family chat. That will make her a collaborator on my mom's project, which means she can pick prompts and will be notified every time my mom creates a new story. Now, speaking of new stories, I want to bring you now over to what my mom will experience as a storyteller, which is the same whether she received Remento as a gift or had purchased it herself. You can see here that the screen we're looking at is of her iPhone, and she's just received a new message from Remento that it's time to record a new story. And for my mom, for the record, my mom is signed up to receive both an SMS message and also an email. So she'll receive a notification when it's time to record via both text message and email. And when she clicks on that notification, you can see that she's brought directly into her email, where she's got an email from Remento letting her know that it's time to record. Here you can see that she's got a preview of the question being asked, which in this case includes a photo. So she'll go ahead and click Share My Memory, and she'll be brought directly into the Remento recording studio. Now you notice that she's greeted by name without any logins or passwords or downloads. And that's because the recording experience is accessed via a secure link that she was sent, meaning she can start her private recording in just a couple of taps. And this experience can be done on any device whatsoever, including your smartphone or tablet or laptop. Now at this point, she can either change her prompt or continue recording this one. Here she'll go ahead and press Next Step, and now she's on the option to tell Remento if she wants to record video or audio only. Now, one of the things we hear all the time from our storytellers is, I don't want to record on video. Maybe it's a bad hair day, maybe it's bad lighting, but it seems that most people have a reason for not wanting to be on video. And that's a real shame, because when we talk to Remento families, they tell us how much they love receiving video recordings. So to all of my storytellers who are out there, if you're willing to give video recording a shot, please do. Your family will thank you. So my mom selects video and is now asked to grant Remento some basic permission to ensure we can capture her recording. Now she taps Turn on Camera and has to allow permissions for Remento to access her device. That was quick. And so now she's ready to confirm that she's happy with the way that she looks. And because she is, she can go ahead and press Next Step. And now whenever she's ready to get started, she can press the big green button and begin recording. So she presses Start Recording. And after a 3-second countdown, she is recording. Now she can record for up to 30 minutes. There's no perfect length. And because there's a photo, I want to show you that she can press the expand button on the upper right part of the photograph to be able to see it in full screen. So she'll go ahead and tap the button, and we can now see the photo in full screen. To exit the screen, she just needs to tap the X button in the same corner. And if for any reason my mom wanted to pause the recording, she just hits the pause button in the bottom right-hand corner. And that's perfect if you want to answer the door or get a drink of water or pause to think about your idea. When she's ready, she can tap resume to continue the recording. And now that she's done, she can press stop. Now on this screen, she can watch the recording. She can describe what if she wants to retake the recording, or she can submit it. In this case, she did an amazing job. So she'll press submit. And that's it for the story. And as a quick reminder, she can record as many stories as she wants within the year of her access to Remento. There's no limit. And if she wants more time, she can have it. Now, if she wants to, she does have two other options. First, she can record another story. She can catch up on prompts that she may have missed. She can respond to prompts that are trending on Remento, or she can even add prompts of her own. Or second, she can view her stories, which will take her back from the recording experience to the website where her stories actually live. Now let's bring things back into my world. Because she has submitted a recording, I, along with all of her collaborators, including my sister, receive an email letting us know that there's a new story to check out. You can see that Remento has automatically summarized the content of her recording and is inviting me to play the entire recording. Of course, I want to watch this thing, so I naturally click and I'm brought into the private Remento website. And here you have it on the left. My mom is talking about the photo, and on the right, you can see Remento has taken a recording and transcribed it. You can see that the first sentence reads exactly the way the words came out of her mouth. And that's because when I set up Remento, I indicated I wanted Remento to provide her words almost exactly as she said them. But if I click on the edit button on the bottom right, I can see that I have a couple of other options. I can see I'm in the writing assistant right now. And if I click edit the story manually, you can see that I can edit the text here however I see fit, like if I want to add punctuation. But let's say the transcript of the video is feeling a bit long or maybe a bit scattered. I can go ahead and click edit, and it'll take me back to the Remento writing assistant. And right now I can see that cleaned transcript is selected, but I can change the story perspective to either the first or the third person. If I click on the first person, it means Remento's speech-to-story technology is going to take her words and then turn them into a polished story written as if she was writing them herself. So I'll go ahead and press first person, and you'll see that Remento is giving me an option to select the length of the story that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and make that a little bit longer. And then I'll press generate preview. And what Remento is now doing is turning that transcript into a restructured written narrative using my mom's language and tone, written as if she had sat down and written it herself. You can see that the first line reads, quote, "This photo was taken on the happiest day of my life up until that point." Now let's go ahead and see what the third person looks like. I'll click on the edit button, and I can see that Remento is going to go ahead and it's going to generate a new version of the story that is written in the third person. It's the same length as the one before, but now includes a new title and tells the story as if a biographer had been hired to write about my mom, Claudette. You can see the story begins with, quote, "It was the happiest day of Claudette's life, at least up until that point." So this version is great. I'll save it for this story. So I'll go ahead and press save. And now all these changes have been saved directly to the account. And as a reminder, all of this text is completely editable. Now this story already has a photo, but let's say there's one I want to add to. I'll go ahead and press add photos, and then I can find another photo on my desktop that I want to add to the story. In this case, it's a church from the place where they got married. Now, once the photo has been uploaded, all I have to do is press done. And now it's going to be saved right alongside the first photo. Now, my mom has already shared a beautiful story here, and I want to let her know how much that sharing of those details meant to me. I can very easily do that by clicking share a reaction, which is going to be available through the heart icon at the bottom of the screen. And doing so is going to allow me to send my mom a reaction message about the story she's just told, which will be emailed to her directly. Now, my mom is a really prolific storyteller and has been using Remento for a while. So if we close out of this page and head over to the stories section of the private website, you can see that she's recorded over a dozen stories, actually several dozen stories. Some of them are from her childhood. Others are more recent, like her dropping me off at college. We've actually got a lot of images about family heirlooms that she told the stories behind. Now, in her case, I uploaded most of these photos into the prompts for her, meaning she was looking at the actual photo as she told the story. But photos can also be uploaded to a story after it's been recorded as well, which is a really nice way of bringing stories to life. And speaking of bringing stories to life, it's now time to go ahead and create our book. So I'll press order books on the left side, and I can see that I'm brought to a screen where I can customize the cover of my mom's stories. And on this page, I can add a photograph to the front cover. I can customize the text, and I can also change the color of the book. And then I can press next, and here I'll have the opportunity to customize the inside of the book. I can specifically exclude stories from being included. I can reorder the stories that I'd like to include. I can drag some up. I can drag some down. And in my case, I'm doing so to try to make them roughly chronological, starting with the earliest part of her life. And then I can tap next to confirm that I'm ready to move forward and preview a copy of the book. So you can see that a preview is going to be generated of exactly how the book is going to be laid out. We've got a table of contents at the top, and then each chapter includes a QR code. And what's, of course, really special about Remento books is that when you scan the QR code printed inside when it's scanned, it's going to play the recording that was used to write that story. And if I show you what that actually looks like, you can see here my mom's Remento book printed out. It's printed in color. It's 8 inches by 10 inches, and it's printed on double thick paper. And if anyone scans the QR code at the top of that chapter, you're going to be able to play the recording that was used to write that story, which will ensure that at any point in the future, your family is going to be able to hear the voice behind each one of them. So that concludes a walkthrough of how our product works. As a reminder, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to the customer support team by emailing support@remento.co, and they will be happy to answer any questions you have. And speaking of questions, we're going to be transitioning now into our live Q&A. And I want to share with everyone exactly how you can share your questions directly in the chat. You'll see on the right-hand side of your screen that there's an opportunity to add your question by typing where it says post a message. So either add your own question or consider upvoting someone else with a similar question, because we're going to be responding to these questions based on the questions that have the most upvotes. Also, please note that at the top of the chat, there's a link pinned for you to share your feedback about the webinar. And if you do, you'll be entered for a chance to win one of 3 free book credits. And so with that, I'd love to start taking questions. And so we will take a moment to generate our first question. And it looks like the first question that we have is from Amanda. And Amanda is asking about if we'll have a recording of this conversation. And the answer is yes, we definitely will. We'll be sending that out later this week. Jerry is saying, my daughter gave me this gift last year for Father's Day. Is there a large expense to expand the time limit? I'm a procrastinator. Jerry, you're not the only one. There's not, I suppose you'd be able to decide if it's a large expense or not. Remento accounts can be extended either on a month-by-month basis or on an annual basis. Monthly, it's $12 a month, or you can extend your subscription for $99. Mike is asking, does each prompt become a separate chapter in the book? Yes, Mike, every prompt becomes a separate chapter in the book, with the exception of some of our prompts can be follow-up questions to an initial question, and those will be included in the same chapter. Thanks, Mike. Jan is asking, is there a way to know how many pages I am up to? I have a lot of stories and pictures. Jan, power to you. That's amazing. The answer is yes. If you go into order books, what you'll see when you click on that button from within the website, you'll see an estimate of how many pages your book currently is. And that'll give you a good indication of where you are along the journey. Rosemary is saying, can we also add a video to our stories? Unfortunately, we don't currently allow uploading videos. So you can upload photographs, but at this point, we're not able to accommodate uploading videos. Sorry for that, Rosemary. It's a question that we've definitely heard before, though. Bonnie is asking, can chapters be published independent of the whole book? Bonnie, I think I'm going to try to answer this question, but if I don't answer it perfectly, send us a note and we'll get back to you with more detail. Remento allows for books to be created with any combination of stories. And so if there were certain stories that you wanted to have published separately, you could create a book of a subset of stories and then a second book with a subset of additional stories. Additional book copies can be purchased for $69. And again, our books are hardcover, color printed, and they're printed on double thick paper. And so I hope that answers your question, Bonnie. If it doesn't, let us know and we'll provide more information. John is asking, can other family members add their memories to a story? Yeah, John, they definitely can. So right now, Remento is really designed for one storyteller to share their stories. That's the way that it was designed to work. We do have some storytellers who will invite their loved ones to record their memories as well. They can do that by either forwarding a storytelling link to that person to record, or they can actually just sit next to that person and record their perspective as well. Fair warning, the speech to story sometimes gets a little bit confused if there are multiple speakers in one recording, but we have had people who are able to do this effectively. Kimberly is asking, how best do I include physical photos that are not yet digitized? Kimberly, I love the question. We covered this in one of our last webinars that we can certainly direct you to, but there are two ways to do this. The first is we have a partnership with a company called Legacy Box, which is the largest digitizer of photographs in the United States. And so I actually sent out a message on Friday of last week that indicated that we have a special promotion going on where you can get a discount if you want to buy Legacy Box through Remento. It will allow you to digitize your photos by shipping them directly to Legacy Box. They will professionally digitize them and then mail them back to you so that you can just add them directly into your Remento account. That's path one. Path two is to use the iPhone or Android camera that you have and just snap pictures of them. And the reality is that these phones are so good that at this point, you can actually get pretty high resolution just using your device. And so if you want the professional, easier approach, Legacy Box is a good tool for you. If you want the do-it-yourself, slightly lower quality approach, your iPhone or Android camera should work just fine. Virginia is asking, is there a limit on the volume of stories and photos to add to the project? And if I stop paying subscription, for how long will I have access to the content of the QR codes in the book? So there's no limit to the number of stories that you can record. We've had people record hundreds and hundreds of stories. When you buy Remento, you have access to a book credit. Those book credits are good for books up to 200 pages. If you want a book that is printed between 201 and 380 pages, we just ask that you pay an additional $30 to cover the printing cost. And Remento's pledge is that for as long as we are in business, which we plan to be in business for a long time, all of your stories will be accessible by scanning that QR code. And so that's our commitment to you. If at any point you think it's important to back up that content, you can download everything in Remento directly to your iPhone, your computer, to a shared drive, to a cloud account that you have at no charge. And so our goal is for you never to feel that your data is held hostage in Remento, but we would love for you to be able to make sure that it can be available to your family to really enjoy. Great question. Thank you for asking. Mary Lee is asking, can I edit an audio story with the story already recorded, or do I need to re-record it? Yeah, we don't have editing tools right now as it relates to editing recordings. So if you wanted to change it materially, we would recommend probably re-recording it, or you can just leave the audio recording the way it is and just edit the text portion if you prefer. Marjorie is asking, if I have added my sister as a collaborator and she finds some discrepancies in my story, can she add or edit, or do I have to do it? Yes, she can. Anyone who's a collaborator is going to be able to go in and make changes to your story directly. And it allows you to either, ask someone to help you with some of the editing potentially, or, or invite someone to do things like upload photos or copy edit or anything like that. So yes, she has full permission there. Sandra, how many pages in the book? Our standard books are 200 pages, and our longer books are 300 up to 380 pages. Are there PDFs of the published books we can obtain? Yeah, we sell ebooks, Glenn. So ebooks can be purchased for a fee that allow you to have all of that content in a PDF with the actual QR codes be clickable and have them linked directly to those stories. And that's a great way of sharing all of your stories with family and friends if you're not interested in buying them books. Patricia is asking, what is the maximum number of pages for a book? The maximum number of pages is 380 at our upper tier. Eddie is asking, how do I know when my subscription ends? I got it as a gift last year, but I haven't used it so far. So Etty, the subscription that you purchased was good for 1 year. And so what I would just do is I would either look in your email to see when did you get an email from us first. It would be 1 year from then. Or you can look in your Remento account by going to www.remento.co, logging in. And then if you go into your account, you'll be able to see when your account is set to expire. Mary Beth is asking, is there an app for Remento? Mary Beth, there's not currently a mobile app. Everything is based in the web. And the reason for that is because we got feedback from a lot of our storytellers that having to download an app and then have to remember an Apple ID password or an Android account was difficult. So Mary Beth, no current iPhone app, or Android app, but we do get this request quite often. Michael is asking, can I go back and edit a story, include additional memories after the focus of the narrative? Yeah, absolutely. All of the text in that story is completely editable. And so you can either record a second recording to that story if there's something that you forgot, or you could just write it into the story itself. Either is possible. Is there a limit to the number of photos and stories I can add to the project? And if I stop paying the Remento subscription, for how long can I access the QR codes? Similar question to before. There is no limit to the number of photos and stories that can be added. And we are committed to making the content that is recorded for Remento accessible through the QR code indefinitely for as long as we are around. With the important reminder that it's all able to be downloaded, and we recommend that you do that. Chanda is asking, what is the best way to video recording? Many times I keep re-recording it to make better video. It's a great question, Chanda. We have some information in the Help Center that specifically focuses on the best way to record your video. We generally recommend that you are in a quiet place with good lighting, and you don't sit in front of a window. So you want neutral lighting behind you, kind of like how I have in my current shot. And then what I would say is just be yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think the more conversational you can make it, generally the better, because our families don't want to hear us feel performative. They want to hear us talk as if we were just sitting with them having a conversation. So I think these are the type of things that get easier as you do it. And they certainly feel easier. And so that would be my recommendation there. Norman is asking, at what point is the book published? Can I determine when to publish, and can I revise the book after publishing? So you are, as a credentialed member of your Remento account, able to decide when you print your book whenever. And technically, the books don't get published. They get sent to a printer. And so we've had people complete 20 stories and then want the first version of their book printed, and then record another 20 stories. And some people might want those first 20 added to the second 20, so you have a 40-page book. But you could also create 2 20-story books if you wanted. And so you can print as many copies as you want, with as many different permutations of which stories get included. And so yes, the answer is yes. We give you total flexibility, and you can revert back to the original book with changes made after you print it. Randy is saying, I've recorded a story for my father. It's not his life story, but a specific story that had a huge impact on his life. Can I make a book about this one story? Would I just record the audio in my phone or send the original file to the website? I assume, Randy, this is probably a story that you did not record using Remento. And so if the question is, how do you take a non-Remento recorded story and bring it into Remento? The way that we recommend doing this, and it's not the most sleek or streamlined, is to just hold up your phone to Remento, to the Remento recording experience, and have Remento record what is recorded on your phone or your other device. It's not a perfect way of doing this. This is something that we're actively looking at in the future, but you could certainly, with that recording, make a specific book. Again, we've had people create single chapter books. We've also had people create, chapters with books with dozens and dozens of chapters. Great question. Can I set up several accounts for my profile? For example, could I make my own profiles for my dad, my grandma, and aunt from my own profile? Yeah, 100%. We allow you to create as many storyteller accounts as you want and have them all be linked to your profile. And so if you want to add someone, it costs $99 to add that person. When you do, it's going to give them a free book credit. That's $69. And so, yes, if you buy for your mom, you can certainly create an account for your dad. They'll be able to go on a similar journey. And we've had people invite their entire families. Michael is saying, when a story is finished during the reviewing process under the edit manually option, is there a word limit to the length of the edited story? No, we don't have a word limit. These stories can be as long as you'd like. Is there a way to reorder the stories prior to finishing the book? Yes, 100%. And if that wasn't clear in the demonstration, I apologize for that. You can simply, in that review step, drag and drop the stories into any order that you want. And so many people will like to have the stories organized chronologically, but very importantly, you don't have to record the stories chronologically to have them printed that way. Great question. Does adding more photos reduce the number of written words per story? Nope, it doesn't. These two are totally different. So if you have a story with a lot of photos, it takes more pages. If you have a story with a lot of words, it takes more pages. If you have a story with a lot of words and a lot of photos, it's just going to be a longer story, but they don't have to balance each other. Good question, Michael. How do I get a list of additional subjects to discuss? So Sue, I would definitely guide you towards the categories page within the Remento prompt adding experience. So when you click add prompt, go to the categories, and we have hundreds of questions that are organized in there by category. Again, many of those were written and inspired by Bruce and some of our other storytelling experts. And so the answer is yes. There's plenty of inspiration there for you. I don't think we've ever had someone complete answers to every single prompt that exists on the platform. That would be a pretty massive book. Mary is saying, do all stories require a photo? No, many stories do not have photos. So no need to add photos. Sometimes my response to questions are very short. Can many short responses be combined to one page in the book? It's a really good question, Christine. The answer is no. Unfortunately, now it's not the case. Right now, the kind of mental organizing framework is one story equals one chapter in the book equals one prompt. And so if you have a bunch of individual stories, I think our recommendation would be to find a way to be able to talk about multiple different moments in your life within the context of one prompt, if it's important for you to have all of that in one chapter. Dana is saying, I purchased this for my parents over a year ago and they aren't using it. I would like to use it for myself. I have paid to renew my subscription, but need to update the account to remove. This is a really good example of a use case where just reaching out to our team at support@remento.co. Our team can take care of that for you. It'll require one of our customer support teammates making that switch, Dana, but we certainly can. Denise is saying, can one add more than one photo to a particular story on a page? Yes, you can have as many photos as you want. We do one photo at the beginning of the chapter, and then if you have more than one photo, those are all stacked at the end of the chapter. Can you pick the chapters that you want the QR code audio attached to? I don't want the audio available on everyone's chapter. At this point, Dana, unfortunately, the answer is no. We simplify things by requiring that every chapter has a recording associated with it. With 10 minutes of audio, how many pages would that be in a book? Randy, the answer is it's different for everyone. First of all, some people speak fast, some people speak slow. So that's one criteria. But the second thing is that we have that slider that allows you to adjust back and forth. And so if it's a cleaned transcript of someone speaking fast, that'll be very different than if you select a shorter story that is being restructured using our speech to story technology in the first person. And so really hard to compare apples to apples. What I would encourage you to do is play with it, and you'll see the length, and then you can preview your book and see how it actually feels for you. Sandra is saying, is it possible for you to show a book that has 380 pages? I don't have one with me. Yeah, they're thick. They're probably about this thick, if you can imagine. Actually, even thicker than that. Yeah. They're quite large and heavy. Yeah. Anna Marie, what percentage of purchasers actually use the tool? Ooh, that's a great question. I don't have that data, but what I can say is that the vast majority of people are actually using Remento with their families. I think the reality is that for some people, it takes a little bit of momentum to get started, and it's not intuitive for everyone. But the majority of people who are trying to use our product are able to do so without any issue. But I appreciate the question. I think that indicates that we have answered as many of the questions that came in. I just want to reiterate my deep and profound thanks for all of you for joining us today. We have reached the end of the webinar. And so at the top of the chat, there is a link that is pinned that's going to ask you to share your feedback. And if you do, you'll be entered in for a chance to win one of 3 free book credits. And so I just want to close by saying, on behalf of everyone at Remento, thank you all so much for joining us today. It means a lot having you here. Big thanks again to Bruce Feiler, our incredible guest speaker, storyteller. The book, A Time to Gather, is available on Amazon or wherever you like to buy books. If it's not a New York Times bestseller as of today, I'm sure it will be in the next couple of days. And once again, thank you for being here with us today. And I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day, and best of luck with your storytelling journey. Take care, everyone.